Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Light 360. This is our first episode in the month of March. So I want to welcome you all to the month of March. Wow, we are already on the last month of the first quarter of 2021. How fast this year is rolling. So, just 4 more of this and 2021 is over. But we're just grateful to God that it's been a loaded year so far. We thank God for all that He's been doing in our lives and also for preserving our lives with all the various things going on in our world right now. I want to welcome you. I see people already joining us. I want to welcome you from wherever you are watching from to Light 360 Season 3. We've been having such a great time, a wonderful time on this show since we started, and this year has been, has been very exceptional. We thank God for all the different people that have been coming on the show to share their stories, and we also thank God for the feedback that we have been getting from viewers of how their stories have inspired you, and something that you picked up from the conversations that we have had. So I want to welcome everyone joining us. I want to ask you now, as you're joining, to share this video on your page, on whatever platform you are watching on. Like it on YouTube, retweet it, just spread it so that we can reach more people. Send the link to your broadcast list on WhatsApp or any one of these platforms, and just spread the word. So we're grateful to have you. Also, as you know, on Light 360, we want it to be interactive. So you can join us in the conversation. If you post your comment in any of these platforms, we will be able to see them, and we can show some of them, like the one we're showing right now. So we can show some of them, and we can discuss. Also, at a point, we're going to have the opportunity to ask our guests questions. So I'm really looking forward to that. So why don't you go ahead and like the video, share the video, and just welcome to Light 360. Just one more time, the purpose of Light 360 is so that we can inspire you, for you to live your best life, for you to live to your fullest potential as a light for Christ in your own sphere of influence. So we tell the stories of people who are shining in their spheres of influence so that you can be inspired through their stories, and maybe something they say will inspire you or encourage you so that you can go forward and just fill the land with the glory, with the knowledge of God, with the love of God and the peace of God, and God's name will be glorified. So that's what Light 360. 360 is 360 degrees, so light everywhere. So we look all around to see people, and then we bring them on. So today I'm so excited because we have a special guest today. It's going to be a powerful, wonderful discussion today, and I'm just going to go ahead and introduce him, and then we will be bringing him on in a moment. So our guest for today is someone that God is using in amazing ways in the city of Chicago. Let me move this a little bit. Yeah, I can see his face fully. That God is using in amazing ways in the city of Chicago. And I'm just going to, read his bio. And then when he comes on, we'll delve more into him and what he does. And then we'll be talking about some other things. So our focus this week is on community empowerment. And we have on the show today our first guest for this week, Pastor Dorin McIntyre. I hope I pronounced his name very well, but we call him Pastor Mac. So yeah, so Pastor Mac is the founder and the executive director of What About Us Charitable Enterprises, and Incorporated. He's a visionary with more than 20 years of experience in outreach and community organizing efforts. He's an award-winning and accomplished sales leader who in 2016, and we're going to be talking about that, in 2016, he felt it necessary to commit his life to full-time outreach, and then he decided to leave corporate America and get into full-time outreach ministry. And the particular area and sphere where he chose to focus on are those areas where people are underprivileged. So areas where a lot of crime and devaluation in properties and in lives, where where a lot of like a lot of things have happened that have hit those places, and they need just God's light, for those areas to be resuscitated through the grace of God. And he's been working there. He currently serves in various leadership capacities locally, regionally, and nationally. He also continues to serve in supportive roles in other organizational efforts. In 2017, he began to pastor Mount Olivet Methodist Bible Church Missionary Bible Church. I think, Missionary Bible Church of Chicago, and have consistently fought to empower the less Missionary Baptist Church. That's the correct thing. Yeah, the Missionary Mount Olivet Missionary Baptist Church of Chicago, and have consistently fought to empower the less fortunate and the underprivileged. He has organized block gatherings to build relationships with community residents, bringing resources to areas most affected by gun violence, going door to door, meeting community members, and then organizing various programs and workshops for youth, for men, job fairs. He also works very closely with the Chicago Police Department. We're going to be talking about that, as the co-chair for the 15th District Faith-Based Community Subcommittee and chair for the 25th District Faith-Based Subcommittee. He continues to champion the less fortunate, and then during this time of COVID, he's been working to respond to that by working with various organizations just to be able to lift up people in different arenas. So I am so excited today to have on Light 360, to join us on Light 360 today, Pastor Mac. So let's welcome Pastor Mac to Light 360.
Good day, Dr. Lane and the Light 360 family. It is a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. I know you are a very busy man, and so you coming here and just making the time is such a delight. It's a pleasure and a privilege. So we truly, truly appreciate you. And I also want to just publicly appreciate you for the work that you are doing in the city of Chicago, what God is doing through your life in making a difference where He has put you. So thank you so much for that. So, my first question to, most of the guests that come on to Light 360 is, who are you? Just to tell us a little bit about yourself. We've just talked about all this amazing stuff that God is doing through you. What's the beginning? How did it all start?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say again, Dr. Lane, I am humble. I'm grateful. I don't feel deserving, right, to be on any platform. I do understand the opportunity of grace and what that means. But to be anywhere or to talk about me is not what my goal is, not my focus. So I'm grateful. I don't think we're never too busy to talk about Christ.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to be here with you all in the Lights 360 community. So just, I guess, to go back in time a little bit, I remember being a child and wanting to get baptized because all the other kids were getting baptized, right? Everybody was going in the water, and, we hear this whole statement of, you go down a dry devil, you come up a wet one, right? If you don't know, it's kind of a Baptist thing, I guess. But I wanted to be baptized, and I've been around the church my entire life. I've had a foundation of Christ my entire life. Not that I've stayed on that course, but my grandmother told me the only way that I can actually be baptized, I had to come back and tell her what the definition of love was.
Oh, wow.
I went, I'm like a 7-8-year-old kid, I'm with the pastor all the time, opening up the lock. I got to reach up to open up the lock, right? Because the lock is higher than me at this point. And, served as a little usher in the church, and, I worked through all those different capacities. But I went to the dictionary, came back to her. She pushed me back. Not good enough. I started to go talk to different people. Not good enough for her. I went to my pastor, and he hit me with the same question: what is it to me? So ultimately, it hit me somewhere where love was just a selfless act, right? Love is a choice. You choose to love people, and you get to know them because you love them, and you don't love them, and then basically you don't get to know them to love them, right? That's not it. And because you love them, you get to know them. So I learned at a very early age that love was the foundation. So after that, of course, I was accepted into the baptismal community, only to realize it wasn't all that I thought it would be, because that's when the work really began. As a child, I always wanted to keep people together, fight for the those that were bullying, and not that I thought I could fight any better than anyone else, but I always thought that everyone deserves a chance to be loved and encouraged and empowered. And so I walked that path as a child, and then through the end of maybe grammar school, I started to drift away. Life challenges began to get the best of me. Living in an urban community, I saw the boys clubs and all that stuff go away. I saw the day camps go away. You went from loving one another to almost fighting one another, and all these different things, right? So,
Was that Chicago?
yeah, that was Chicago. So I grew up in Auburn, Gresham.
Okay.
I had a lot of experiences in Inglewood, and some other areas in Chicago, and I've had my opportunity to see the other side of the gate. You should know what I mean by that. So, and then coming through that, I got into high school, athlete, played sports, but there was always this kind of emptiness, in me, because I got away from Christ, and went to college. I played football, organized football both in college. I went to Alabama State University, played high school, and then my grandmother passed. So the thing that was my rock for my entire life, ended up being kind of that thing that got yanked out of my life. And I remember my grandmother having that conversation with me about one day she had to leave. She was trying to prepare me, and I remember a distinct conversation where she was saying, "Hey, I'm leaving here one day," and I jumped up, left the room. I don't want to hear this and all that. She said, "Well, when you get through, acting a fool," she probably used some choice words. Come back and we'll have this conversation. So we had that conversation, and it always stuck with me, that what love is. So I found myself, working through some challenges in life, and I ended up going to this amazing program called Jobs for Youth. I found myself, living in what we call the street life, right? And being involved in that, and realizing that I was really good at that, but Christ wouldn't allow me to excel at that.
So it's different between good and excel,
That's right. Yeah. So, and being a part of that, I found myself in some dangerous situations and some troubles, and Christ kept putting that roadblock up in front of me. And one day, just sitting, on the couch flicking channels, I ran across this company called Jobs for Youth that was in downtown Chicago, and it was like ages 16 to 24. And here I am, a 24-year-old young man at the last piece of it, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Got into a lot of things at a very early age. At 11 years old, I probably was doing things that adults probably haven't experienced yet, by choice. Again, coming up in a Christian home, I had choices.
Yeah.
So when I did that, I went to this program. It's probably one of the pivotal moments in my life, because I got an opportunity to be mentored. And then I went into an organization, and I started working at a job that I then became a manager. Then I realized what I thought my calling was I loved helping people get to their next.
Okay.
That was my whole thing, right? So I went from that to a document finishing company, and I worked there for many years. And I went from basically being, a peer to managing my peers. So I saw that trajectory in my life, and what that looked like and what it meant. So then again, I went into a software company, and I was a sales leader in a document finishing. And then I was a sales leader in a software company. Many awards and sales achievements, been all over the country, been all over, other spaces, Hawaii, Jamaica, and all these things that sales bring to you. Been married for many years, and with children and grandchildren. I oftentimes say God been good to my face.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
To stay looking young.
yeah, you look really young.
Yeah, people don't believe I have grandchildren, and now I'm living in this life. That I found myself in 2016, looking in the mirror. And I was changing people's lives with a stroke of my pen, meaning that I hired you, and all of a sudden you have a $50,000 a year job, $70,000 a year job. And I saw that as my calling, basically saying, man, I'm helping people. I'm changing lives through the power of my pen and persuasion. And again, really good at that, even to the point of excelling at that. But still, there was an emptiness in me. And one day, corporate America showed me its real face. That's what I like to call it. It showed me its real face. And it was no reason for me to walk away from corporate America. I just didn't like the changes. I didn't like, where I was going with it. And I believe God had did what he had done to me in the past. He put a block in front of me that I couldn't get around. I couldn't get over. So I started to really ask myself some serious questions. And I came home one day and told my wife, I said, hey, I think God is calling me away from corporate America. Now, I left corporate America with no plan, no finance, no anything. All I had was some savings and some things that I've acquired in life, thank God, And my wife said something to me that really was helpful. She said, if you don't do what God is calling you to do, we won't make it anyway. So
wise wife.
I said, yeah, wise woman. I'm not deserving of her either, by the way. So, Dr. Land, that's when it all hit me. And I said, I have gifts and talents that I know God has placed in me. And all this time I've been thinking that it was to make the world a better place through employment opportunities. But really, it was a call to touching people where a lot of people won't go. In the alleys where kids are playing, game bangers are, drug dealers, rolling up my sleeves, playing basketball in dress shoes and alleys and trying to reach people and love on people from that perspective.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that. So from your story, it looks as if there were some individuals that made a difference in your own life, because sometimes what we do now is often a reflection of what we have received. So I heard you mention your grandmother.
Yes.
And then you mentioned a mentor, right?
Yes.
Somewhere. And I'm sure there have been some mentors along the line. And then you also mentioned your wife too.
Yeah.
That pushed you and said, we just have to do God's will. Can you speak about that? The importance of people around us, mentors and all that from your own experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've been grateful to always have what I consider to be men of integrity around me. Those great uncles, we oftentimes laugh and tease. These are the guys that will cut grass in slacks, in a button-up shirt, right? But I always had that opportunity to have great men of God, where I saw men going to church every Sunday. I had uncles and great uncles, and I saw people who had integrity, that loved family structure. Extended family in that way. God also blessed me to have mentors professionally. I was always one that would go and knock on the door of, say, the CEO and say, hey, let's have lunch. Let's brown bag it, when you have time. I've knocked on the marketing directors because I wanted to really find myself. And I learned early on that if I seek certain things, I realized what I didn't want to do. That was kind of my goal, right? I had mentors in the ministry who taught me a lot of things. And I oftentimes tell people, you learn from people who do the wrong thing, right? And you watch that. And we oftentimes don't look at those as mentors, but those are too, because when you see things that are not done properly, and you say, well, how do you know it's not being done properly? There's the Spirit of the Lord to tell you those things, but you learn what not to do. And that's just as valuable as learning what to do. So, just having people in my life that God poured into me and, through, and having that opportunity has just been great for me.
Awesome, awesome. So let's talk about transitions, because you've had to do, several of them. You had to transition from, corporate America, just starting from that into outreach ministry. And I'm sure in ministry, you've had to go through several transitions.
Yes.
You transitioned into pastoring from how you did all that. I just wanted you to speak to our audience, those who are, maybe they are also in a valley of decision at this moment, that they need to make some kind of transition. You already talked about the corporate America transition, but you started talking about it. How did that go? Like, how did you navigate that into ministry? Like, what did that look like?
Absolutely. Just to touch a little bit again about those transitions, there was always change around me. I think I realized early, and other leaders realized early, is that I'm a good change manager. I always see the silver lining in everything. I never was concerned about change, right? And by doing that, I was able to transition from saying being a peer to leading a peer. And going into ministry, I've always had, What About Us was always a vision of mine, even when I was working corporate America. We started out giving scholarships to less fortunate, underprivileged people who were academically sound but socially challenged. And we'll pay all their prom fees, graduation fees, luncheon fees. Now, granted, we didn't have a lot of money. The organization didn't have a lot of money, but $200 or $300 that you can go to your peers and gather to bless somebody who otherwise wouldn't have experienced any of that in their life, graduation or other things, afforded that opportunity. So again, those boiling points, right? That start getting me kind of fired up as to say, what if we could do more of this? And when I had that pivotal moment of leaving, it really was, and I have to be honest with you, it was a very frightening time, right? It wasn't comfortable. But I have this quote that I learned, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I didn't fear the unknown, because I've always understood that God is the God of both the seen and unseen, right? Seen and unseen dangers. So I stepped out on faith, and I walked, on some area that I've always been okay with going against the grain and being by myself in my decisions and trusting God. So that transition was difficult. It was scary. It was uncomfortable. But that power of God on the inside, the love of Christ on the inside, helped me to see. And I always say that love creates opportunity. And that's what it did for me. Loving who I was and other people created opportunity for me.
Yeah. Very good. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So despite the fact that it was uncomfortable, it was scary, but you just moved because Christ, that's where God was leading you. You went through the discomfort and all that, and then you landed on the other side. And I'm sure it's not been comfortable, since then.
Still uncomfortable.
Yeah. So working with God, we have to learn to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, like you said. So moving into outreach ministry, right? And working in an underprivileged, underserved area. So how did you pinpoint, like, this is the area that I want to work, and these are the set of people that I want to work with? How did that go?
Yeah, that truly was God led. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Everything I knew and understood about the south side of Chicago was where I was comfortable. To be quite honest with everyone, God used a woman to get me to the west side. I met my wife in a meeting over 20 years ago, and she lived on the west side. And, I guess God used those worldly passions to shape us.
Yes, it does.
And I that was an opportunity where I really, when I first time I looked at it, I was like, man, this is gonna be my wife, But God used that as a vehicle to get me to the west side.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to that. That's so true. Remember Moses? Moses was very curious. He saw the burning bush, right? Let me see, why is this bush not, why is it not consumed even though it's burning? Right. Just because he turned aside to see, he had the voice of God that led into his destiny. So sometimes God allows burning bushes around us. It could be our wives, it could be something else, that just catches our attention, and we find ourselves moving into the center of God's will for us. Just wanted
Yeah.
to say that to what you were saying.
No, that's absolutely correct. And I think the passion for loving people again, and choosing to love. So all it was just a different corner in another neighborhood, right? But it was an opportunity for me to just go and stand in some of the toughest places and love on people. I remember standing on Chicago Avenue in Cicero
Mm-hmm.
by myself. I would have some soup warming in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I would come out and I would talk to people and invite them back to the church to have soup and sort through clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the type of things. So then that's when I started to realize that God wanted me planted on the west side of Chicago. My preaching experience and my first time of ministering all happened on the south side of Chicago. But I can't, fool this great audience into telling you it was some moment that was clear to me. It was foggy. It was challenging. It was sometimes unsettling, but it was just this urge and pull that was so strong in me
Mm-hmm.
that I just accepted that call, man, and walked in it.
Yeah. So was there a difference, like south side, west side? I know there's this south side, west side stuff.
Yeah.
West side, the best side, and then so you also had corporate America. So
Mhm.
coming from corporate America, moving from the south side to the west side, was there some culture shock, or did you enjoy
I
how
probably get in trouble for this, Dr. Lane, for saying this, but I found that, you know, and we use this terminology loosely, but it was just real on the West Side.
mm,
People were authentic even in their pain.
mm, mm,
It was hidden a lot on the South Side, right? You really couldn't see it. People would hide that they may have been addicted to drugs very well. The deceit among the streets was hidden very well.
mhm,
The dangers were there and you really couldn't see them. But on the West Side, it was like what you see is what you get. And
mhm,
I think that's what kind of really hooked me because I consider my person as what you see is what you get. I don't try to be anything that I'm not.
mhm,
So the cultural change and shift for me was just, man, people are wearing their pain on the outside.
mm,
God giving you the vision to see it
yeah.
and then doing something about
Yeah. Wow, that's so powerful. And within the same city, just two different ways of approaching life, right?
it.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So now getting there, I just wanted you to talk to the audience.
Mhm.
Your passion was to help the underserved. You wanted to be there as a light for Christ.
Mhm.
In that area. How did you go about? What was your first steps? That you
Mhm.
the first set of people. What was that story like? Like for somebody, if somebody is thinking of this now to start something and all that, how was your own starting journey on the west side?
Yeah. As I look, thank you for that question because oftentimes when we do this type of work, we don't really think about those things,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a person who kind of assess things after they happen a lot. I don't really, assess them before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I guess that's what
just in
faith
the
is all about.
we're just in the moment, just flowing. We we make the mistakes. We just try by error. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that. I would encourage the audience to not let anything get in your way.
Mm,
Be someone who looks to remove excuses.
mm, yeah.
Um, didn't have a lot of money, a lot of resources, any of that stuff. But I realized very quickly it don't take a lot of money to, like I said, get a big pot of soup going in the church on a low simmer
Mm-hmm.
and then come out and stand on the corner and just talk to people, you know. And it started on Chicago Avenue and Cicero for me,
Okay.
which is probably one of the tougher corners on
Mm,
the west side.
yeah.
And then it moved down to a street that's Central and Lake.
Mm,
Most people would know, which is another very tough corner.
yeah.
And I would just say, let's go out and talk to people. And one of the things I learned quickly and that I took from my professional career was listen to learn
Mm,
and then learn to listen. So basically, learn how to listen.
mm-hmm.
But then as you're doing that, listen to learn,
That's so
you
powerful.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and give people a voice. Everyone has a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And when you appreciate and respect the voice of others, That's how God talked to you about what you should be doing,
Yes.
and confirming that what you're doing, affirming what that walk is. So in many instances, I can encourage people here that just, if all you have is a pack of meat and a loaf of bread, make some sandwiches, get a few bags of chips and get out there,
Yeah.
and stand in a space, because God will lead you to that space, and then as of late, coming out of 2019, you in this non-for-profit sector, especially being a grassroots organization, you fight for every dime.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting a lot of money, you won't get any money, basically. So you're self, financing, and you're doing different things. You're pouring your own time, energy, and effort into it. And in 19, God spoke to my heart and said, in 2020, I won't have to work that hard, that He'll align people. Now, 2020, COVID hit. How in the world could I believe that? But I trusted God in so many other instances. It was not hard at all for me to believe. So if I can say to this audience, if God did it in small things, He can do it in anything, not just big things, in anything.
Yeah.
So trust and believe that He don't bring you this far to leave you here, right? And you just have to trust and really just, and the key is really staying sensitive to the Spirit, staying in prayer and meditation. And wearing your pain on the outside. Lord, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Lead me, God. Guide me. Direct me along the way.
Wow, that's so powerful. What about the danger aspect? Some people are scared when they hear about the west side, the south side, and you were in those dangerous places doing ministry. How did you handle that? And how are you handling that? Since you're still consistently serving.
Yes, that was one of the interesting things that went through my mind once I realized I was standing in an alley, with what someone else would say unlikely people, right? And on the west side of Chicago, and looking around, saying to myself, "How did I get here?" Right? But I think, again, when you love people, that genuineness, no matter who they are or how dangerous they are, you have to first believe that grace and mercy, right, will always be with you. God is your protector. I always say that God will, fight my battles and He'll clear my good name. Those are not things I need to do. I don't have to worry about me. If I take care of Him, He'll take care of me, right? Take care of His business, as we hear, and He'll take care of mine. So in doing it, I guess God put in me at a young age that I've never been fearful. But I've never been boastful either, right? I don't think I'm this tough guy, this brawny guy, but I also said to myself, you know what? Everyone needs love. I don't care who you are, where you are. So going into those dark places, I was selfless, Dr. Manning. Honestly, as I look back on it, I just was selfless, didn't really have any regard for myself. In that you get courageous. And then after that, God has started to align people. Trust me, some of the most dangerous people in those communities began to embrace me. They'll see me coming down the street and they'll say, "Hey, Pastor Mac," and all of a sudden I'm feeling secure. And it's not because of law enforcement or the group of people that may be with me. Because remember, a lot of times I was by myself with it, or I was with my wife and small children doing it. And I don't advise people to just go out there and jump out there. Really pray and ask for the Spirit of God to go before you and with you before you go.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody has ever told you, but I want to tell you this. You need to write a book with your quotes, just Mastermind Quotes, because you have about, like one-liners that are so powerful. Like I saw one under your bio too. Don't let your past mistakes hinder your future progress. And you've said a bunch of them on this show. So I think you need to compile them, in a mini book, and spread it, because those quotes are powerful. Don't trust God, or if God did it in small things, He will do it in big things. Love creates opportunities, right? So a whole bunch. Don't learn from people who do the wrong things. I'm just repeating some of the things you have said here. Love is a selfless act. So a bunch of them. So I just wanted to mention that to you, that that's one of the ways that God is working in your life, like just
Thank you.
those statements. So now on the west side, there you started pastoring later. How did that go about? You didn't start with pastoring, right?
Right.
Eventually you moved to pastoring. What was the story behind that?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, a very delicate and a sensitive topic. Because we were in a position in our church where the leadership was shifting and
Okay.
changing. That particular pastor, after some years of following him and standing by his side, he decided that it was something else that he wanted to do or felt that God was taking him to.
Okay.
The church had declined. From my mentor had passed some years ago. Previous to that, I
Okay.
was walking with that pastor that was then leading for some time. And I always want to encourage people, if you can't follow, you'll never lead. Right?
Oh, that's so powerful. Yeah, we've been talking about that over and over
Yeah,
last week. Yeah, you can't follow,
yeah.
you can lead. Yeah.
You'll never be able to lead, right? And even in leadership, you're following, right? So,
Yes.
if
Yes.
you look at the shepherd, right, he's kind of like behind the flock.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
look at that analogy, right? You look at that spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, the church had declined over the years, and it got down to maybe just a handful of people. My wife, children, maybe a couple others, and that was it.
Mm.
And in 2017, there was a discussion on whether or not we should close the church or keep the church.
Mm.
And again, I have to turn back to my wife. She made a statement that it's not up to us to open and close God's church.
Wow,
You know,
your wife is so wise.
I'm not deserving, Dr. Lane. I'm telling you,
Wow.
I'm so undeserving. But when she made that statement in a church meeting, I had been asked to pastor that church some time ago. And I said, God didn't call me to pastor. I said he called me to everything but pastor, right? It was just me being in denial, right? And when that time came, I realized then that my place was there. And opportunities had came where when I decided that I would stay and cultivate the health of a church that had no money in the account, no people really, and just bring it, would let God lead me to bring it back, right? That was a tough decision to make. And then on top of that, the devil, the enemy, began to give me opportunities. Now, people will lose this thought because they think that because you're getting offered other churches, that's what you're supposed to go and do, because they have budget and they have great edifices and all this stuff, right? So when I seen that very clearly, I knew what God wanted me, and everything came back to the forefront where it was like, okay, this is what God was telling me to do when I left corporate America. It just wasn't at the moment. And sometimes people need to know the whole plan of God before they walk into his faith, right? Walk in it in faith. They need to know the whole plan of God, and God don't work that way. He already told us that he has good intentions for us, right? His thoughts of us are good and not evil. So we have to trust and believe. So in doing that, I stood on faith, and from that meeting, we had little to nothing. When I tell you, and I'm not telling you, anything that's not true. We had less than $20 to carry a ministry, facing rent, facing light, facing gas, all these bills. And now you also have the shepherd. And oftentimes I say, people are in church because they are sick spiritually. They're sick spiritually. And if you think you're about to now shepherd a great group of people and everybody's going to be all on the same page and rah, 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 don't believe that, right? I'm sick. I'm sin sick. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So doing that, I realized right away, this is what God wanted me to do. And God made it happen. We were able to meet the rent. We were able to do different things. And people look for big things, but I was looking for the small things of God. Those intimate moments. And we just stayed in there. Now here we are, 2021. I don't think anybody has passed it through a pandemic. If they are, they're probably 100 and something years old at this point. No one has lived through what we've had to come through in these last couple of years, if you put it that way. But I just Dr. Lana, as I'm saying it almost brings tears to my eyes, the grace of God that allowed us to just stand. We say at our church, our doors swing on the hinges of love. And
Wow.
that's what it was all about. Love just brought us through.
Yeah. And that's walking by faith, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you have some things to say about walking by faith, because even from my own experience, and anybody who is called of God to do something, you are going to have to walk by faith. And that's what you are describing. He's not going to tell you the whole thing, show you the whole picture. You're going to have to go step by step and trust and trust and trust. And, you are scared. You are, you look as if you are not going to make it. And then suddenly, yeah, you just show up there. Tell us, about faith. What's your concept of faith from your own experience that you like to pass to the audience?
Yeah.
By faith in our calling. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And the reason why I say it's a tough question, because I think it's difficult to put faith in words. I really do believe that. Faith to me is more action, and not action of your own, but the action of trusting and dependency on God.
Yes.
And if we look at it, you learned faith as an infant, right? It was inherently put in you when you had to depend, the dependency on everyone around you to take care of you when you couldn't walk, when you couldn't communicate, all these things that you couldn't do. And then, as I say all the time, we become adults, or we get grown, as they say, right? And then we lose that. So, that true trusting and believing that God will is something that's almost indescribable. But you find it when you reflect. And when you look at your life, and you don't look at it through what I call like a hazy glass, you be real with yourself. You look at your reflection, and you start to realize very quickly it was God that saved you when that gun that somebody had pointed your face and pulled the trigger, but it didn't fire.
Yeah.
It was God that saved you in the many car accidents I've been in, right? And I was not driving any of the vehicles. Wow. And I survived 8 of them, right?
Wow.
It was God that, when I, had illicit relationships with females, that my last night could have been my last night, right? I could have walked away with a disease. I could have, when I start to look at the fact that when I had children at a young age, didn't know how to be a father, didn't know the first thing about, what a real father was, except for what I kind of saw. So all of those was those moments of just believing. And I think faith, in my opinion, it's like grains of sand. It's all those little pieces that just continually compiles to a point where now it builds a foundation. And it strengthens itself as you keep accepting it. And I think everyone will believe it, more than especially preachers, right? When you realize that you're justified, that the way you are had nothing to do with you, faith becomes real.
Yes. It's all by His grace. We're justified by faith. And if God looked at us the way we ought to be looked at, none of us will have anything, but He looks at us in Christ and what Christ has done. So He's our righteousness. So wow. Wow, thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about the organization that you founded. What about us, charitable? Let me see. I don't want to, it's What About Us, charitable enterprise. Yes. What is that about, and how did you start, and what are you doing with that?
Sure. So approximately 20 years ago, my wife and I sat on the couch, and we just kind of co-founded this organization, not having any knowledge of what, the business particulars were about LLCs and non-for-profits. A businessman of sorts, right? I understood structure, I understood business, because being a sales leader, I had a book of business that I knew and I had to run, and I had to hire and develop talent and relieve talent all at the same time, right? So the original name of it was What About Us Foundation. And I learned initially a life lesson, right? And this is for everyone. If you have a business, get your domain names and, and legalize things,
Yeah.
because as we got down the path, the web wasn't a big thing at one point. And when
Mhm.
I got ready to open up the website, somebody owned the name What About Us Foundation. So we had to change the name
Okay.
just enough to embrace it, right? So the idea of What About Us Foundation actually and became What About Us Charitable Enterprises started with me going back to my high school and trying to give back,
Mm.
right? And corralling my peers of my graduating class,
Okay.
and when we did the like high school reunion, I had this idea if we all just put on a banquet and use the proceeds of that to create like a scholarship to
Mhm.
give back to students who are underprivileged, socially challenged, but academically sound. And
Mhm.
I wanted the school counselors to choose those students, and we wanted to kind of anonymously give it,
Mhm.
right? Didn't want the spotlight, just wanted to bless people kind of behind the scenes. Well, that didn't last long at all, because on the flip of that, the counselors and the principals wanted us to do it publicly to embrace people. I didn't want to embarrass people because I know what struggle feels like, and it's not to be on display.
Mhm.
So we began to do that with a very small budget, and we began to, just touch our constituents, right? And going to my job and my company, and I traveled a lot, so I'll keep those little, shampoos and soaps, and I would tell all the sales force, hey, put them in bags and give them to me,
Mhm.
because then I would take bags and make health bags and take them out to the corner. Again, things that don't cost you a dime to do. It's
Yeah.
effort, right? And just using some business savvy, right? Going back to the story what Christ was talking about, that shrewd businessman in a sense, right? You
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
but having those opportunities, and we began to bless children that way. But I realized very quickly that there was more that we needed to do holistically. When that young person went back home, they walked back into an atmosphere that probably wasn't conducive for learning.
Mhm.
They went back to a home that maybe had an abusive parent, or they went back to a home that didn't have the type of things they needed. They were not food, food scarcity there, or there were no finances, or there was no real foundation of what it takes to get to your next. There wasn't any kind of leadership economically or socially. So we began to look at all those things, and I said, you know what, we could do more. We
Yeah.
could do more.
Mhm.
And we just began to do that, and we began to encourage other people to
Mhm.
get, behind us and volunteer and do those services. But what about us in the name?
Yeah.
To wrap this up, what about us in the name? The idea was to create an organization without boundaries,
Okay.
meaning that I don't want to sit in a room and come up with a plan and an idea for somebody else. I
Oh.
want to create an organization without walls,
Yeah.
meaning that the people we're serving should
Mhm.
tell us what they need,
Okay.
and then we figure out how we get it done. So then that calls me to go knocking on doors and using those same corporate America concepts, and so finding out who can help us. Even if you don't do it through us, do it for them. And then walking with people. When
Yeah.
I get someone some help, don't just leave them there. Walk with them, check back up on them, encourage them. So what about us is really in the name. What
Mm.
about us? What about me, the one that's having a mental, breakdown? What about me that's struggling to get some pampers for my baby? What about me, that just don't know where to turn and what to do?
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. I was, thinking about that name, that there must be something behind that name.
There's a lot more
What
to
about
say.
us is, you know, a lot of people whose voices have been excluded,
Yeah,
like, they people are trying to do stuff for them without even asking them that is
yeah.
what you truly want. Like, so what about us? Why don't you listen to us? Why don't you, hear us that this is what is truly needed, right?
Mm.
That's what the name is about, right? Did I get it right?
Oh, you got it
Okay.
spot on, and it's so much more to be said about that. And again, sometimes, like I said, my favorite subject is not me.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So how did that work out practically? Like, I just wanted you to give us a picture.
Mm,
Did you get people together and ask them questions? Like, what was your process? And then
sure.
I would like to talk about some of these programs, specific programs that you do. Um, after then.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, when you're out doing outreach and you say you're on a corner, or you go to I always believe you go to people. People are not going to come to a building or a brick and mortar all the time to receive any services. I would throw people off. I'm sure, I do things that are probably not conventional. Well, I go out on the corner, in 13-degree weather and say, let's have a coat drive. Well, why can't we do it at the church? The church is just about 5 doors down because people are not going to come to the church. Let's go out on the corner. But while you're out there serving people, just talking to people, and asking questions about their challenges and, and just being observant, just watching people and listening to them while they're standing in line for something. And something God showed me, it's one thing to give people your stuff, but you also have to give people your Christ. Right?
That's another of those sayings.
I'm blushing here. But when you give people your Christ, you have to go where they are. When Christ was ministering, and I try to mimic everything Christ did, he went into the thick of things. He sat with the people who other people wouldn't. And while people are in line, I'm standing there talking to them. They don't even know I'm the pastor, right? I got sweatpants on, baseball cap. I'm just being me. There's a time for a suit, but there's also a time to just not be all about your outward appearance.
Yes.
And I'm standing in line talking to people, and that's when I'm having those dynamic conversations, and that's when I'm listening for the voice of God through the person or people that we're serving.
Yeah, wow, that's so powerful. So let's talk about the programs. So we had read about some of them in your bio. You have programs for men, programs for youth, like the Rite of Passage. Program, what does that look like?
So the Rites of Passages basically was really the first program that we, really organized and put in a public space to, bring people together. So the Rites of Passage really started out as, how do I get to my next? It's the question, right? And then we ask that question of ourselves, how do we get people to their next? Whatever that is, wherever they are, whatever position they are in life, which requires you to go out and figure it out. Right? It's not a secret sauce or equation to that. And then talking to people and encouraging and all that, what we did, we started doing these workshops, right? And these workshops were really to help young people figure out their path, right? What is it that you want to do? And what we would do is bring like law enforcement, doctors, lawyers, carpenters, blue collar, white collar, if you will, financial people. And I'll put them on like a podium, and I will give the audience, the young people, an opportunity to ask them questions about their profession, how they got there, do a little snippet of their bio, but then give the audience an opportunity. And then we will break them out in spaces where they would navigate to the person that career that interests them the most. And that's where the magic started, right? And now they're talking to them and they're trying to give that opportunity for them to learn from them. So Rites of Passage is kind of like, if we could say it this way, it was the crown jewel and the foundation of what we built everything else off of.
Yeah. Wow, that's so powerful. And then the other ones, some of your other programs that you do, you talk about them.
Yeah. So from the Rites of Passage, and the funniest thing, when we shifted to the mentoring aspect virtually, a lot of people thought that wasn't going to work, right? But we were able to do 18 sessions through the summer.
Wow.
Where we had youth 3 days a week for 1 hour.
Wow.
And we taught them life skills like conflict resolution, financial literacy, community engagement, vision casting. So, and that, what we found was, what about their parents? What about the people at home? What about the uncles and whoever else, the grandmothers and whatever? So we began to say, how can we service them? So that's when the Men Development Forum came along. And I partnered with the state's attorney's office. They were trying to figure out what they could do. So then we did the same kind of, recipe. We brought resources to the room. We brought it to the people, and we said, here it is. And this is how you can get it. And then we walk with them and we help empower them through those efforts.
Wow, that's awesome. How did you get to working with the police? I know crime is one of those things that you have you want to address. How did that start, and how did you get to working alongside the police?
Well, I'll kind of start in the front and go back. The police wasn't my favorite people at one point, I have to be honest. And not because they did something to me, because what I was doing in the world. uh, I remember having this moment, this aha moment, if you will. I was sitting in, it's actually in a meeting, and it was FBI agents, sheriffs, police department from 2 or 3 different districts, and lawyers. I looked around. I said, "There's way too many police in this room." Right. And I laughed, and everybody else laughed because I guess I shocked them because I said it out loud. You know? I said, so "This is not how I seen my life. You know, I didn't see my life this way." But I think what I realized very, very quickly is that all of us are responsible for what happens in our communities, and everyone has a role to play.
Yeah.
Law enforcement can't lock everyone up to solve the problems. There must be a relationship.
Yeah.
Relationship is necessary. And I found myself, and I guess this is going to be another saying. By the way, somebody told me that I should be calling these Macisms, right?
Yeah, that's a good title for the book.
Macisms. But I consider myself a spoon in a pot, and I stir and serve. And all the ingredients are all the people who reside and have responsibility in a community.
Yeah.
And law enforcement is one of them. So I just walked into the police district one day and just said, I want to engage you all, and I want to be a catalyst somehow. And how do I do that?
Wow.
You know, and I'll show you how God worked, Dr. Man. And everyone, you know, that loves the Lord know that He set things up. I sat in this room, and I'll be specific, in the 15th district. And the police officer that I ran into on the street one time, he had told me, "Yeah, we can meet." But something happened where he couldn't come. And one of my high school football classmates that we played football together with, that I had not seen in like 20 plus years, walked in a room and said, "Yeah, Officer so-and-so can't meet with you today." And he looked at me. He's like, "Hey, I know you." And I said, "Yeah, I know you too." And I said his name. He said my name. And all of a sudden we're connecting. So there again, God is showing us, if we just trust and believe in what He's doing, everything will work out. So really, it was just me applying the same thing I learned at corporate America. Go knock on doors, and don't be afraid of what's on the other side of the door. And if you want it, right, you have not because you ask not. Right. And as long as you don't ask to miss your own lust, God is faithful to give you those things. And we don't know what to do with what He gives us. So then we have to pray and ask God about those things. So that's how I got into talking to law enforcement and working with them. And all the people that I ended up and I've connected with over the years, I run into them on the streets.
Wow. That is
I walk into situations. I go to a beat meeting and I meet people. I'm walking the streets and I run into an outreach worker. And if I can say this to anyone that's listening here, that if you want to be effective in this, you have to come outside of your comfort zone.
Yes. Very, very, very powerful. So the fruit of working with the police, like I just wanted you to talk about that. Like what have you seen from that in the community with the partnership with the police, and co-chairing the subcommittee for faith-based the faith-based subcommittee for the police. What are some of the fruits that you have seen with that?
Yes. So some people have a challenge, right, with law enforcement. They don't trust, they don't believe, they don't have faith in them. And as we see in light of some of the injustice, right, that has happened, is reason for people to feel that way. But I also realize that about preachers. People don't believe us either.
That's true.
So some of the fruit of that labor has been removing that barrier of the angst between them, right? You know, the police is not there just to criminalize people, but they also are there to be a resource in the community, and they need a road, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm a vehicle. The people in the community need a road to try to figure out, hey, how can we get opportunity from law enforcement? Then all of a sudden, they didn't know they had domestic violence officers, business officers, youth explorers. They didn't know all a faith-based subcommittee. Nobody knew these things, right? and I didn't. But again, that I guess that lifetime of being in sales and learning the what they call, that quid pro quo type of sales approach, and talking to people, what can I get in exchange for what I give type thing. I started to see the fruit coming out of it, where law enforcement wanted to be involved in changing the narrative of our young people. And they needed navigation help as well.
Yeah.
And community wanted to be involved with law enforcement, but didn't know how and what. So the root of that, you just start seeing people seeing or feeling safer, and going back to the time where police officers, you knew their name, they lived across the street from you, lived on your block, and you seen them as human beings again.
Yeah. Wow. That's so powerful. So you're also involved in I just want to be sure, the Chicagoland,
Yes.
together Chicagoland United in Prayer and all that. And we're planning some things that are coming up over the next few weekends. The building block of peace. How did you get involved with the movement? First of all, before we start talking about the upcoming program.
Well, how did I get involved in the movement? Wow, another God move. We were just so what we did a couple of summers ago. What we call it thing 100 block 100 churches. And the concept is to get out there, and in hot spots, we call them, areas that have been overwhelmed by crime, violence, etc.
Yeah.
And we strategize with law enforcement to figure those areas out, but we take a different approach. Faith-based leads that effort. So we would go out and we chose 10 to 12 different areas, and we identified pastors, resource organizations, law enforcement, community residents to go to those blocks. And during those times, that from what we call that Memorial Day to Labor Day timeframe, when we were on those blocks on a weekly basis, consistency is key. I must say that here. If you are consistent, you will see results in whatever it is that you're doing. You can consistently be a thief and you'll become a better thief. Right? Consistency improves a person, right? So even if it's wrong. But when we talk about going out to those communities and loving on them, every week during our what we call our Bible class time, we were out on the blocks from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And there was 0 shootings in those areas during that time.
Wow.
On a weekly basis. And when there was some type of shooting or some type of escalation in crime, we would do what we call a mobilization. Right. And that meant that everyone who was involved in this will come together and go and set up on that block where we'll have music, resources, food, we'll love on people, knock on doors, and greet and meet community, say, hey, we have options for you. And then that got noticed by people throughout the city, because only reason I would go live was to encourage other people that you can do the same thing. On Facebook. I wasn't doing it to bring any kind of, publicity to myself or what we were doing. It really was to be encouraging. And I think somehow that got around and people started noticing. And then all of a sudden, I think one of your guests is going to be Reverend Craig Nash from Chicago Craig, who I met in the field because they started seeing what we were doing on the west side, and they're all the way out in Roseland. And he came out there and stood with us and was like, this is amazing. How do you all do this? And that's when the conversation started with, Chicagoland. We used to do trainings on a community engagement. Not that we were trying to tell anybody how to do it or we were the foregoing authorities on it, but it was just more or less empowering and firing up people about being, being careful for your area, your space. You're a pastor, you got a few blocks around you. It's like the cross, right? You're in the middle and you got blocks around you. Just go and love on the people in your neighborhood.
You got to pastor the block. You got to see all those blocks as your parish, right? You open the, like just like we were talking about ministry without walls. Churches also have to be without walls, right? Thank God for the buildings we have. We use them to train people and do all that. But really, our focus should be on the community that surrounds us. Like Jesus went about doing good, just helping people all over the place. I think that, so with the building block of peace, you are involved in the planning. It's coming up. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a question in this place now. What do you think? This is a nice one. What what do you think is the solution to the crime problem in Chicago?
Honestly, loving on people,
Mm,
right? People, I have to say, because I was in this space at one point in my life where I didn't love myself.
mm,
Right? And if we're honest, that's probably a space where many of us have lived, where we didn't honor and love and value. People don't feel self-worth.
mhm,
So
mm,
because they don't value themselves, they don't value other lives.
mhm,
They're desperate to do things to get what they think they are immediate needs. And, so I think connecting people, first of all, in a loving way,
mhm,
and then connecting them to resources and opportunities and giving people choices,
mhm,
right? It's one thing to walk up to somebody and say, this is what you should do, need to do. There's
mhm,
another thing, and it goes back to our earlier conversation of listening to someone and say, what is it that you want to do?
mm,
I
yeah.
remember a distinct conversation very quickly I had with a guy, a young guy on the corner was selling drugs. And I said, well, what do you want to do? When you make all this money, what are you going to do?
Mm,
I'm going to buy a building. I said,
mm,
okay. All right. You know how much money you need to save, how many hours you need to work in order to save that type of money to do it?
mhm,
He hadn't thought about those things, right? And then I said, after all of that, you do realize you have to exist. Nobody's just going to give you a building because you got $200,000, right?
mhm,
There are things you have to do in your life, and I think those are those moments where you start to people feel your genuineness
mm,
and how authentic you are. So loving people to help
yeah.
would be my way I answer that question.
Okay. I'll ask a follow-up question on that. So if the solution is loving people, what do you think is the cause? Or is there even a cause or is many causes? Why gun violence in Chicago from your own perspective? Like what's the what's the root of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes without question is sin, right?
Mm,
Sin is the root cause of all of this evil. But what happens is when people are desperate, in my opinion, of course, and I don't think I'm any authority here, but this is my own concept. When
mm,
people are desperate to get what they feel like they need or i.e. want,
mm,
they're willing to do anything to get it. And if
mm,
you don't check that energy at the door, per se, if you don't catch a young person like when they're in third grade versus waiting till they're 16, 17 in order to change their narrative, you lose them. So
mm,
now people, and conflict resolution is another, it's kind of a piece of the previous question and a follow-up question,
mhm,
how to, navigate even when I don't agree with you.
mm,
There's a way to resolve conflict that doesn't have to turn violent. But if
mm,
you've been in a violent home or if you've been in a violent space, like if you pay attention, you can see sometimes that when children get upset, even as little as 1 or 2 years old, the first thing they do is lash out in a violent way.
mhm,
And you
mhm.
have to turn that around
Yeah.
and challenge that. So the root cause of a lot of things that go on, I think, has its pace and desperation, and the fact that it's just not enough people out here caring
Mm, okay.
and
Wow.
doing something with the caring.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. So there's another question, and it says, how do you, as a Black man, reconcile working with the police with police brutality?
Yeah, no, that's a tough question, right?
Mm,
So I've always been one to, if I have a problem with someone, I need to go and face my problem,
mm,
right? I'm
mm-hmm,
not afraid to go before the person that I don't agree with and have dialogue.
mm-hmm,
And I believe healthy dialogue is the source and the key to resolving things.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
then recognizing that I have a voice. And
Yeah.
no one can take that from me. I say, I can have a degree in business, I can have all these whatever sales awards, accomplishments, and all that. But the one thing people can't take from me is my faith.
Mm,
What I know, you can never take from me. So I
yeah.
don't have to be a rich man. I don't have to be, you know, this well known anyone. I'm a human being, and I have a right to speak my truth to
Mm-hmm,
you about the situation. And if you are the perpetrator of that, then you owe me an answer.
mm,
So in that, there's a way to approach people, right? And respectfully, a lot of people don't know that even when you talk, you're talking to someone that we may consider a bad seed in the community. there's still a respect line that goes there, right? So when I go and I try to work with law enforcement, I want to get to know that person. I want to get to know them. Who is the person behind the badge?
Yeah. Wow.
And you find out who people are. I mean, some of them are just bad seeds. Let's just face it, but then some of them are really good people, and they want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to know that there are good people in the force. There are people who are actually there. They want to make a difference. They don't like police brutality, and then there are some bad eggs and all that that are there. Of course, and of course,
also Christians,
the systemic issues and all that. But I mean, just like you said, I mean, why the best thing is to meet, confront, talk about it. See, maybe you can get them to see a new perspective and then work together. So I think that's the right approach that you are taking. Yeah, thank you for answering that.
Sure.
That question. So a question here, while you were speaking, you talked about the characteristics of the West Side, that people wear their problems, and all that on their face. So what do you think about the South Side? Like what is the character? I guess person, what's the characteristic?
Somebody trying to get me in trouble out there, Dr. Lee. I should excuse myself right now and run out of this interview. Growing up on the South Side, I had way more years. I know half of my life was spent pretty much on the South Side, and some of my what I call my sinful years, intentional sin. Right. And I realized that, and somebody may see this differently. This is just the way I saw it, right? People were a little more deceptive. The characteristic was not honest. Like I could be sitting in a room with somebody who's planning to hurt me. I've had those experiences on the South Side. Well, I actually was in space with people who did break in my car and stole my sound system, and I knew them and had been knowing them even from a child. And the dangers that was there because people grew up and do two different games, right? Now there was a lot of loyalty there as well, right? I don't want to get that mixed up. There was people who grew up from grammar school up to high school, and now we're representing two different sides of the coin, but there was some love there that says I can't do that to you, and I won't allow nobody else to do it to you. But because I think my characteristic is more or less, hey, what you see is what you get. I'm not trying to hide who I am. I'm not perfect, but I'm by no short of the imagination, someone who's not afraid to be who I am. I found that more in this space. And it could have been that's what God wanted me to see to make me stay there. Yeah. Because my natural tendency would have went to go back where I was comfortable.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for answering that. Thank you. Another question here. You said the vision is big enough for everyone. Yeah. Which, whose vision? Like, I guess, whose vision are you talking about? Is it maybe is it the individual? Is it God's? I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
No, that's a good question. That's a great question. I'm glad that someone asked that to even come back to that. So a lot of times when organizations write, corporately, they write vision statements. Non-for-profits write vision statements. In church, we write vision statements, right? My personal take on that is, a godly vision, right? Write the vision, make it plain, right? So God has a view of the world that's much different than ours, right? But he also has crafted it in a way that everyone fits in it in their own unique way. So if I am a resource organization that provides jobs, and you're a resource organization that provides food, and I'm a faith-based leader, and you're a law enforcement, and you're a senior, and you're a young adult, and you're a teenager, you may be someone who's displaced or whatever it is, everything that we do should incorporate everyone in the space.
That's powerful. The vision is big enough for everyone. So
yeah, to play a part. I mean, if we want to see a reduction in violence, then we have to be able to see ourselves in it. I'll give you a quick example. If you're planning an event, and this is advice, don't plan the event and then invite people to your event. How about invite them to the table to plan the event with you so that everyone feels and sees their part in it.
Yeah.
More successful that way.
Yeah. I think we need to do that more because, people feel that, the vision is just too small for everyone. So everyone trying to do their own thing. So, and we all really need to come together in that vision and really collaborate and get things done. That's very powerful. All right, so audience, more questions. We're about we're getting to the ending of today's show. But if you have any more questions, just put it up there and I will read it. I'll read it. But while I don't have a question now, so while we're waiting on that, I wanted to ask you about, I didn't ask you about how you were able to deal with your children, all of them being with you while you were doing all, on the west side.
Oh my goodness.
Did that,
Yeah. So first of all, I live by this code, if you will, that if my children can't be involved in what I'm doing, I need to question why I am there. So for instance, if one of my grandchildren was here right now and one of my children needed me and we were doing this interview, somehow my grandchild is going to be a part of this interview.
Oh, yeah.
And you would say, well, we can't have the grandchild in the interview because they're going to mess things up. Then I don't need to be here, right?
I understand that perfectly. Yeah.
That's reality. Reality is life doesn't stop, or, you have to adjust.
Yes.
So we raised our children. I'll give you an example. Christmas mornings went like this in our household. We would get up, have service, go to service. We would leave service and we would go and do things, with the charity. We would do Christmas dinner for the community, give them gifts and everything. We would then leave there and come home and do whatever it was that the kids were expecting for Christmas. That's how they grew up. Right. Well, we would go out and do community stuff. And again, some of this stuff, it probably, now that I'm older, I might consider differently. Right. We live in some more dangerous times or whatever. But I remember walking up on, say, a dice game, with, my then young son and some other men and some other people and just saying, hey, I'm not here to disrupt the game. I just want to give you options. And whoever's listening, know this is how it goes. Those guys stopped what they was doing for the moment. They stood on the money, right? They put their feet on the money, and they're looking to see if I'm a threat or not, right? And then I'm just sharing my love with them, my heart for Christ with them, and my children are visualizing and seeing that. Oftentimes, when a child, oftentimes people try to take people out of the sanctuary if they're disruptive, if they're crying. I'm like, no, leave them here. That's what makes church real for me. So that's what makes life real for me, And honestly, that. Somebody would disagree wholeheartedly and say, you are crazy. Well, they're all adults now and graduated from college and having children of their own. So it had to be the Lord. That's all I can say.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. So last question for today is, how have you been able to navigate this COVID lockdown season in your ministry?
Yeah. So back in July of 2020, March 2020 kind of started all of this, and we were doing what we call, the virtual service. And I always encourage pastors to do what God telling you to do, right? Don't do what I'm doing. Do what God tells you to do. And our church began to say things like, Pastor, we're getting lazy. We're on virtual, but we're not on the screen, and we're laying down, we're falling asleep, we're doing all the things. And I think they were doing that in service too, but they won't admit that, right? They fall asleep on me in service too. But they began to say things. So we began to pray specifically about that. In July of 2020, I always encourage our church that small is not broken. Just because we're a small ministry don't mean we're broken, right? We're what God wants us to be. Maybe we're the Green Berets of ministry. Maybe we're the strategic, people of ministry, right? Where some places small churches can get in where big churches can't, and vice versa. Big churches can be places small churches can't be. So we prayed, and we pray every Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. in a conference call. We've been doing that for years. So it was easy for us to transition when COVID came and lockdown, when we just went to that. We did audio, then we went virtually and all that. But in July, we decided, let's pray. When we prayed a couple months up to that, July, the first Sunday of July, we went back into the building and we spaced it out. We were agile enough to have our mask and,
Yeah.
socially distant. And we've been having service that way since that time.
Mm.
And it has been the best move because people are growing spiritually
Yeah.
through that effort.
Yeah, that's been the way it is with us too. So we
Yeah.
started meeting in August, similar,
Yeah.
piece it all out, and we've been doing it since then. And it's
Yeah.
I mean, COVID is bad, but it's there've been some positive things that came out of it
True.
in the growth of people, the connections of people, and all that.
Yeah,
Wow.
but Dr. Lane, we also we only go into the church for the service on Sunday. We
Yeah.
do Bible class virtually still,
Yeah. Yes.
but then we still go out and we serve the community. We just do it safely, and thank God we haven't had any
Mhm.
issue.
Yeah. I have a question. One last question. I said the other one was the last.
I'm on your time, brother.
Yeah. So they say, can you talk more about what people will get from the CUIP training?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So first, I want to say that I don't think we're going to say anything from maybe a grander scale that people haven't either heard, and that could probably be counterproductive into trying to promote, because I'm not trying to promote. But I don't think we're going to say anything that people maybe don't know once it's said or have heard.
Mm.
What we want to do is show the reality of what can happen when you actually do the work.
Yeah.
So when you hear people talk about their experience of bringing people together and sharing that experience of being out on the street consistently, and equipping people with saying, now from 6 to 7:30 every Wednesday, we're going to actually go out and walk around our neighborhoods, but actually add structure to that, saying that at 6 o'clock we're going to have a brief. Then we're going to talk about who goes where, who does what, the safety things involved, and all of that. Who was going to play what role. Then that hour you're out there engaging people. Then coming back and debriefing. And then what do you do with that information once you have it? That's the structural piece of that equipment and part of the deploying part. So it's really about really lighting the fire that's burning in people who just don't know how to do it. Sometimes you think you need 20, 30 people. Go back to what Christ did. He had a handful of people, and he changed the course of the world and added on to it. So, it's to encourage people that even though you may be small in number, don't be, discouraged by that, right? Even if you have a big crowd of people, because maybe you belong to a larger church, there's a way to go about it that way, because that can overwhelm a situation, as well. So this is an opportunity to really light the fire, bring structure to it, right? So people can see it in action, and then also show the various ways that people do it. Because there are things that people do, like night church, prayer corners, night walks. It's various ways that it's being done, and capitalize on that. And then you're able to identify what's my strength and how can I best do it too.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. So with that, we are on the 6:30 mark. Wow, it's been a wonderful conversation, 1.5 hours. I want to thank you so much for coming. I know, like you said, talking about yourself is something that you are not very comfortable with, but I want to thank you for being how did you say it? For being comfortable.
Being uncomfortable.
I just, sharing about yourself. It's been inspiring. Your story is inspiring. We are very grateful for what God is doing through your life on the West Side and in Chicago, and for all these things you've been talking about, the partnerships and the impact that is going on our audience. I'm sure they are very grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on, and we will be reaching out to you later, to come on again, to have more discussions as we move on. We really want to thank you. We appreciate you so much. And your wife and your children and grandchildren. Please say hello to them, for us too. Thank you for coming.
I will. I'll say this in leaving today. I'm grateful and humble for the opportunity. I know this is the necessary part of it, right? I have to do this. This is the call of my life, and I understand that. I don't shy away from it, but I don't think I'm anybody or anything special. And I think that's one of the things that I want to come out of this training or this engagement, is that anyone can do it with the love of Christ in your heart. And for my Southsiders out there, I made my way back to Auburn Gresham, and we do a lot of events out there as well now. So I didn't abandon my roots. Got back to it, and I found that people are the same everywhere.
Yes, yes.
They got challenges, problems, circumstances, and situations. It's if you are going to be who you've been called to be.
Yeah. And I'm sure, people are watching from Africa too. It's the same, everywhere. It just manifests in, unique ways based on the environment. But, these things are just the same. The gun violence, crime, all those things that you've been talking about, it just translates that we all need Christ and we all need love. I think the deficit.
I would love to get to Africa one day and love on people there, man. So I got to Africa.
We gotta make that happen. So we'll talk more about that because we go to Africa a lot. In the past, I think in the past 2 years or so, we didn't travel last year because of COVID and all that. But the 2 years before, we're in like 12 African nations. So we do trainings in those places. So we'll work out something. So we'll work out something. Africa is a lovely place, to just visit and be. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. So audience, thank you so much for joining us. This is Light 360 again. This is the first day for this week. We have it Wednesday to Friday. And tomorrow we're going to be back again at 5 p.m. Central, 11 p.m. GMT with another story, another guest, and just going to contribute to what we're talking about this week, which is about community empowerment. We want to thank Pastor Mark for joining us and for the inspiring story that he has shared and all the Marxism, all those things. You guys have to go and meditate on all those things again and again because those were very, very powerful statements. And we hope that Pastor Mark will put them in a book or somewhere so that we can actually refer to those things, in the future. So thank you, everybody. We're going to be signing off right now, and we will see you tomorrow again. So bye. Pastor Mike, you can stay. I'll just sign off from the social media. Yeah.